Hello, welcome everybody into the create tables section. So we created our database in the previous section. It was called, let me just pull up the MySQL. So it was called Problem Solvers Data Warehouse. Now we are trying to create tables inside it. As we discussed in our data model, let me just go to the data model quickly. We said we have four different uh, tables here. One is the engineer, complaint, customer, and appliance. So let's start creating those tables. How do we really create those tables? So create table statement goes like create table, table name, what are all the different columns under it, and what is the kind of a data type. Let's say what is the data type for that particular column. Customer ID is a integer, customer name is a text, and it's called varchar because that is one of the data types. So we can always refer to different data types here. Let me just start creating, and that would help you understand how it goes. Okay, let's open the MySQL workbench. Let me create the table customer. Let's say create table ps underscore dw, which is the database name, dot customer, open bracket. We want to have a customer ID, which is the unique ID for each customer. It can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sequential. So let's call it as integer. We don't want the customer ID to be null, or empty. So let's say not null, and view, auto increment. So let's say we want the customer ID to be in a very sequential way. Let's say it should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in an order based number. So let's say 1, 2, 3, and this would be ABC customer, this would be EFG customer name, and HIJ. This is the way we want. We don't want like 1, 2, 4 being the customer ID, and where is the customer ID 3 gone. So we don't want that to happen. So while loading our data or while inserting our data, whoever is inserting, automatically the next number should be auto incremented. So auto increment will take care of those. Okay. Next one is customer name. Customer name is a text field. Text field in here is varchar 100. We don't want anything to be null here, so let's say not null. Primary key, let's add the primary key. Primary key, I'll explain you the primary key in a second. Primary key, customer ID, bracket. Let's quickly verify. Okay, I think it clearly tells me, if you see, as soon as if they are keywords, the color code really helps me the way it needs to be done. So I have create table psdw.customer, customer ID int not null, which is an auto increment number, which is an integer, customer name varchar 100 not null, primary key customer ID. Control enter. Let me refresh. I see my table with the columns what I want. Okay, so let's understand about the primary key. So to understand the primary key, next go on to the next slide. Let's assume there are two tables from our data model. While I'm explaining the data model before, we have the customer table and the complaint table. So in the customer table, each individual ID, that is customer ID 1, is pertaining to this customer name, customer ID 2 is this customer name, and that customer ID is raising a complaint, so it is also available in the complaint table. But let's imagine what is a primary key per se, right? If you are trying to call up a call center, and if you're trying to, let's say, a telecom call center like an AT&T or a Verizon call center, and if you're trying to give them their information, the first thing they will always ask you is for your telephone number. Telephone number is your primary key here. It means based on that telephone number or your cell phone number, the call center representative can identify what's the address, what's your name, that's the billing amount. So that way, it's the easiest ID or easiest key or is the easiest way to find out or store your information in the entire um, database, right? Uh, let's say today customer ID 1 is Quentin Chen, and customer ID 2 tomorrow is changed to a different customer. It's not possible ideally, but let's say if it's changed, and if you want to know about customer ID 1 here and customer ID the new name, it's going to be a very different problem, right? So now using the ID is more easier to find out any particular information. So that way I feel primary key is an important aspect here. Okay, saying that, let's continue creating our other tables now. Excuse me for that. If you have any specific questions, please drop me a note in the forum here, or you can always reach me out via evalbi.com, and I'll be happy to help you on if you need further concepts on primary key. Okay, the next one in the list is engineer. So let's do create. What I'll do is, because engineer has a similar structure as per our data model, I'll just do engineer here. I'll do engineer ID. I'll do engineer name. And let's do engineer ID being the primary key. Control enter, table created, refresh, check the table is there. Yep. All right, so let's create one more table. That's the appliance one. I have the scripts already written here for all the stuff, so let me just copy paste the script from the SQL file what I showed you in the resources section. So let me just take this one, run this, refresh. We have the appliance section created. The last table in this section is the complaint table. Let me just quickly copy paste that. Quickly explain you complaint table basically as the complaint ID, who raised the complaint, on the complaint date, which is a date data type, who explained on which date this complaint was raised, which engineer worked on it, which customer raised the complaint, which it is about which appliance, how many hours did the engineer put on it as a labor, how many hours did it take for the engineer to travel there, and what is the complaint ID, which becomes our primary key in this case. So running this particular, refresh again. So we have all the tables created. So congratulations, we have our all tables created. Let's move further.